Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's gonna mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
Welcome to What She Said, the heartbeat of Canadian women's voices, with me, your host, Candace Sampson. Here, we dive deep into the raw, unfiltered stories and triumphs of women from coast to coast. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement where empowerment and education collide and where mansplaining is shown the door. We're here to celebrate, uplift, and echo you. So get cozy, tune in, and let's embark on this journey together, exploring the rich tapestry of women's lives, their battles and victories, right here on What She Said. Well, I'm back from my summer vacation, and all I can say is, wow, what a difference a couple of weeks can make. It's amazing how much can change, not just personally, but globally in such a short time. There has been a palpable shift in energy, with people everywhere stepping up and speaking out for a fairer and more just world. This renewed vigor for change is something I'm eager to keep alive and well through our discussions. This week, as I'm working hard to channel this fresh energy, we'll tackle a variety of topics, some monumental, some seemingly minor, but all crucial in the quest for positive change. From economic disparities to the latest in entertainment and strategies for effective branding and marketing, each conversation today is designed to inspire, provoke thought, and motivate action. So without further ado, let's dive into today's compelling lineup and keep the momentum going for a better, fairer world. Join me as we explore these pressing issues together right here on What She Said. Here's what you can expect over the next hour. We're starting today's show with a critical discussion on global inequality. Over the past decade, the richest 1% have accumulated over $40 trillion in new wealth, while the bottom half of the world's population has seen barely any increase. This stark disparity poses urgent questions about our economic systems and the prospects for global equality. I'm thrilled to have Diana Sarosi, Director of Policy and Campaigns at Oxfam Canada, join me today to discuss. Next, Brodie has been busy over her summer break, soaking in all the latest in entertainment to share with us. This week, she brings us her thoughts on Coup, Joseph Schumann's clever take on the 1918 influenza pandemic, and The Fortress, a chilling portrayal of our recent challenges with isolationism, the pandemic, xenophobia, and environmental decline. Plus, she has a lot more that she wants to share with us. We'll also explore the crucial world of marketing and branding with Vanessa Chiasson, a seasoned writer and strategist who has spent over a decade freelancing. Vanessa works with value seekers to craft beautiful stories and provides coaching and consulting for writers, bloggers, and content creators. She's here today to share insights on how freelancers and creative entrepreneurs can effectively market and brand themselves. And for fans of The Bear, you're in for a treat. I'm excited to introduce you to Samantha Shier, a talented writer making waves in the television industry. Samantha was a staff writer for the upcoming series English Teacher and recently wrapped up as a writer's assistant and script coordinator on season 3 of The Bear. She's here to give us the inside scoop on her experiences and the exciting projects she's been a part of. So let's jump in right now. The richest 1% have amassed over $40 trillion in new wealth over the past decade, while the bottom half of the world's population has seen a negligible increase. This staggering disparity raises urgent questions about our economic systems and the future of global equality. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Diana Sarosi, the Director of Policy and Campaigns at Oxfam Canada, to discuss. Diana leads a team of campaigners and policy experts dedicated to advancing gender justice, tackling growing inequality, supporting social movements, and promoting active citizenship. Welcome back to What She Said, Diana.
Thanks so much for having me, Candace.
Well, when this report came across my desk, I was obviously intrigued. The numbers are absolutely staggering. So, can you start by giving us an overview of Oxfam's recent findings on global wealth disparity and the implications of these statistics?
Yes, absolutely. And, even though I've been working on this for so long, every time I see the numbers, I'm still shocked as well. Oxfam has been raising the alarm bells on rising inequality for 10 years now. So we put out a report every year, showing how this gap is growing, exponentially every year. And I'm shocked when I see this number. So as you said, the richest 1% have amassed 42 trillion in new wealth over the past decade, whereas the entire bottom 50% of the world's population has hardly grown their wealth. And so, but basically over that time, over the 4 decades, the top 1% earners in the G20 countries, their wealth has risen by 45% over those 4 decades. And it's really staggering amounts. That's why we've been really advocating for a wealth tax to curb some of this exponential growth in wealth at the top, while we see, at the bottom, people are really struggling, which is also true here in Canada, right? With the rising cost of living and so on. It's not a way to run the society.
Those numbers are so staggering. It's hard to wrap your head around. And I think that people need to almost sit with those numbers and let it absorb in their head that, billions of people have less money than 1% of people.
Yeah.
It's insane, the numbers. And so what are the main factors contributing to this growing wealth gap?
It really is staggering. And in our last report, last January, we actually pointed out it's going to be a matter of a few years until we have the first trillionaire. Just imagine that, right? Like when we got to the billionaire point, we were already like, oh my God, how can someone be a billionaire? And now we have, close to 3,000 billionaires in the world. And we're going to see the first trillionaire very soon. And so what has happened, at the same time as this wealth of the super rich has grown is there has been sort of a war on fair taxation. And so, that, they're not only do they have tremendous economic power, but they also have tremendous political power. They steer policies in their favor. And over the last few decades, they have really eroded our fair tax systems and made sure that they are almost paying no taxes at all. They have, very complex schemes of avoiding taxes. And so it's happened parallel to this rise in wealth that we've seen taxes going down. And so not only are they able to accumulate that wealth very quickly, but they don't pay their taxes.
And as you mentioned, they have huge influence in places in politics and on our everyday day-to-day life. And we really need to be questioning when we're seeing messaging from certain parties is who's bought that messaging, frankly. That would be my question. And just, quickly, have you calculated the difference between a billionaire and a trillionaire? So I know, for example, between a millionaire and a billionaire, a millionaire would be, if we were to look at it in time, would be 11 seconds. A billionaire is 31 years, which just sort of shows that huge gap between a millionaire and a billionaire. I can't imagine what a trillionaire is. It must be incalculable. I mean, at least to me.
Yeah. I don't even know how many zeros to put behind those numbers. It's just so
it's
huge.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So let's go back to tax policies, because we hear this a lot, tax the rich. And so how have the current tax policies contributed to the disparity we're seeing? And what changes do you think are necessary to address this issue?
Yeah, so there has been, as I mentioned, this race to the bottom in terms of taxation. Obviously, it's very difficult for one country to raise taxes. So there has to be a bit of a global consensus around it. Just like, the race to the bottom was the same way. One country started and then others followed, and to stay competitive, right? Obviously, companies, a lot of these rich people are shareholders of massive companies, right? And so these companies are really working towards lowering the taxes to be able to put more money into the pockets of the shareholders. But for countries, it's very difficult to stay competitive when their taxes are much higher. And so as this race to the bottom, we now really need sort of to reverse that. But what will require that is a bit of cooperation and consensus among many countries so that these rich folks don't just move their wealth to another country where they have to pay a lot less taxes, right? And so that's why we were really excited about what was happening at the G20 Finance Ministerial last weekend, where they agreed to cooperate, where they really recognized like this is a really big problem that is causing a lot of, very, very difficult consequences in our societies. And so let's come together and cooperatively try to come up with a deal on how we're going to tax the super rich, because one country at a time won't make a difference. And so, so that's why we were quite excited about what was happening around that. Obviously, this is just a small step for them to make this commitment to cooperate. And we need to keep pushing, but it's a step worth celebrating.
I want to talk about the G20 a little bit more in a second, but I'm just curious though, can you talk to what are the impacts that these low tax rates for billionaires actually have on global economies? How does it impact us every day?
Yeah. So there maybe to point out three particular ones. This kind of disparity can really lead to entrenched poverty because governments don't have the resources to provide basic services like education, healthcare, but also in many places, workers are exploited for the sake of massive payouts to shareholders, right? So it's very difficult for people to dig themselves out of poverty because they're just like, one hospital bill away from completely indebting themselves. They can't send all of their children to school, for example, because they have to pay for it. So it really entrenches poverty, and we've seen that over the decades as well, right? The rates of extreme poverty, especially over this last few years, where the growth has been like extreme on the inequality side. We're seeing a rise in extreme poverty again as well, which is really sad considering the progress that has been made. But the other part, it also really stifles growth because instead of reinvesting money into development and innovation, it just goes into the pockets of these shareholders. And they, live these crazy, lavish lives that are actually contributing immensely to climate change as well. And then, this kind of inequality, it creates social conflict, right? People are fed up with seeing people living lives that are just so indulgent and luxurious while they can't pay their rent and don't know how to put food on the table for their families, right? And so it just really creates that kind of conflict that we're already seeing play out in many places now.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We're talking with Diana Sarosi from Oxfam Canada, and we'll be right back after the break.
Over 25 years ago, on September 29th, 1998, we watched a brainy girl with curly hair drop everything to follow a guy she only kind of knew all the way to college. And so began Felicity. My name is Juliette Littman, and I'm a Felicity superfan. Join me, Amanda Foreman, who you may know better as Megan, the roommate, and Greg Grunberg, who you may also know as Sean Blunberg, as the three of us revisit our favorite moments from the show and talk to the people who helped shape it. Listen to Dear Felicity on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Okay, we're back with Diana Sarosi from Oxfam Canada. We're discussing a wealth tax. And Diana, I'd like to talk about the G20, if we could go back to that a little bit. So were there policies or, initiatives agreed upon that these countries are now going to go back and implement? Or was it a little bit more lip service and pushing it down the road a bit?
Yeah, so they didn't come to agreement on policies. The G20 presidency is held by Brazil right now. And so they've made taxing billionaires a priority as part of their G20. And so they've put forward an actual proposal around what that could look like, which was discussed. But they didn't all agree on the proposal. However, they agreed that this is a problem that we need to work together on. And so this work is going to continue. And I think there are sort of two streams of thinking around this. As I mentioned, the ideal scenario is all the countries in the world are on equal footing. So there isn't a possibility for these rich folks to come up with schemes to reduce their taxes in other jurisdictions around the world, right? And so that over the last few years, there has been negotiations at the UN level, which includes all countries, towards a global tax convention. So this is a new development. There have already been efforts happening at the OECD level in coming up with sort of schemes that include the OECD countries, but that doesn't include all countries, right? And so that's why there has been this push to move these negotiations to the UN level to include all of the countries on an equal footing. And so obviously, some of the countries thought it should stay within the OECD. That's where we've made the progress over the last few years. That's where the negotiations have been happening. And then some of the countries that weren't part of the OECD, for example, want this to happen at the UN level. So that fight is going to continue. And there we have to continue pushing. Oxfam really wants to see it at the UN level so that all the countries have a fair share, because there are large jurisdictions around the world that are bleeding resources every year because they're basically, exploited for their resources or their cheap labor and don't receive the taxes that they should be receiving. So just to give you an example, it is estimated that the entire continent of Africa loses between $50 to $100 billion a year in taxation. So that is, international companies coming in. A lot of it is mining, oil and gas and so on, right? Taking all of the resources that are there out and then move on. But because they're not headquartered there or have these elaborate schemes, they're not paying any taxes. Now that is way more than Africa gets in development aid, right? And that is the money that they really need to build up public infrastructure, public services, dig their populations out of poverty. And so we completely understand why these countries are no longer interested in what happens at the OECD. They want to be part of these conversations, right? And they want to be part of a system that works for them and not just the rich countries.
Let's turn the lens a little bit for a second on gender equality. How does the wealth disparity affect gender equality, and what measures can be implemented to address the intersection of these two issues?
Yeah, so that's a good question because it's not so obvious at first thought, right? And so what often happens is that, if there aren't these public services available in a country, it really increases women's burden of, for example, unpaid care, right? If people are sick, they're the ones who are caring for them. If a country doesn't have resources to build public infrastructure, to provide electricity, water, it is again women who have to walk for hours to collect firewood, to collect water, and then cook over fire, right? So also, in countries where education isn't provided for free, it is often girls who don't end up going to school because they either have to take care of other family members or the family just doesn't have enough money to pay the school fee and so on. So it really puts women back in terms of being able to acquire the opportunities and financial security that they need to grow their economic security, really. And so it is that is really setting women back really from a very early start. And then they end up, being situated in jobs that are undervalued. They're making poverty wages, right? It really is sort of a lifelong cycle that they're trapped in, when these kind of important public services that we all rely on here, are not available to them.
And you referenced it a little bit earlier, but how does climate change intersect with wealth inequality, and why is it crucial to address both of these issues simultaneously?
Yeah, so there are several impacts there. So, a lot of the wealth that is being built is actually built on very polluting industries, right? Like mining, oil, gas, and so on. Like really the fossil fuel sector is at the top there. And obviously that is those are the sectors that have really contributed the most to climate change and still continue to do so. Another area is, and we will actually put out a report later on that later in the year, is around just the massive amount of greenhouse gas emissions that the very rich are using every day just for their very lavish lifestyles, right? Like private jetting everywhere, their super yachts and so on. They really, are a disproportionate contributor to climate change by emitting just so much carbon. On the one hand, they're really invested in industries that are destroying our planet, and then they're living these lavish lifestyles that are just, crazy in terms of polluting the planet as well.
Well, Diana, I love the traction that this report is getting. I'm seeing people talking about it everywhere. So hopefully it encourages action, not just from politicians, but from people listening to put the pressure on politicians to act. Of course, Oxfam's doing great things. So how can people keep up with what you're doing and in the actions that you're taking to change this?
Yeah, the best way to do that would be to visit our website, oxfam.ca, and sign up for our newsletter, so they can find out about the different things that we're working on, but also opportunities to engage in actions. And then follow us on social media is really the best way to keep track of what we're doing. And we always have different calls to action out there to support the advocacy that we're doing at a governmental level. So yeah, there's lots of ways to follow us.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Diana.
Thank you so much.
This podcast brought to you by Ring. With Ring cameras, you can check on your pets to catch them in the act.
Izzy, drop that.
Or just keep them company.
Aw, I'll be home soon.
Make sure they're okay while you're away. With Ring. Learn more at ring.com/pets.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use, but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year. And plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
It's time for Saturday Night at the Movies, and Anne Brodie is back. And did you spend your holiday watching all of these shows for us?
I did. Some of them are joys, some aren't. But, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, I did love the list you sent to me this week. So let's talk about Coup.
Yeah. Wow. That is amazing. All right. So Peter Sarsgaard, who executive produces this thing, stars as this itinerant wanderer who, during the 1918 flu pandemic in the States, where people aren't isolating, they're trying to suppress news of the pandemic so as not to scare people, because World War I is just ending and they've had enough. Anywho, so he finds this billionaire who is isolating. He talks about his liberal causes and whatnot, but he makes sure to keep himself in a bubble with all his servants. So Sarsgaard shows up, says he's a chef. He's going to cook for them. He's taken in. And little by little, he begins to take over. And so what we have is the seeds dropping of a class war, not just class, but also in terms of personality, strength of determination, and a little bit of evil. So he rallies the servants around and says, look, we demand double the wages, actual bedrooms, not hovels in this mansion. We're going to live the life. And of course, the husband and wife have no opportunity to say no to them. So they're stuck because they sense danger. This is very funny. It's weird. It's kind of bittersweet. And it is so worth watching. I mean, I really, really dislike this character Peter Sarsgaard plays. By the end of it, I'm frightened that there are people out there like that. But it covers, COVID, U.S. politics, and the pretense of being all powerful beautifully. It's so good.
What struck me was that despite the fact it is set back in time, it could be laid over what's happening now. Crazy. So from Coup, we go to The Fortress, which is another sort of class war dystopian style movie. Or actually, no, it's a series. It's a series, right? Yeah, a series.
Yeah. So the world is in a bad place politically. There's another pandemic. There's any number of pandemics floating around. So Norway decides to cut itself off from the rest of the world. It's part xenophobia and part self-protection. Nobody else is doing that. So they block everybody out. Some families who are abroad are not allowed back, or they're separated. Militia comes out to make sure that all these rules are followed. And even they realize that they won't go to Europe or anywhere else for their food or supplies or relief, whatever. They've got to do it themselves. So they have people working on vaccines. They have fish farms notched way up. And then, of course, things turn against them. The fish become infected. That's their sole protein at this point. The farms are becoming infected. So not only have they locked the world out and unable to get help, they have locked themselves in. They are prisoners in this country. And it's chilling. The disease that the fish have is discovered to be related to the Black Death of the 1300s. So you can imagine what it feels like. So the tension in this thing, the dystopia, as you mentioned, it blows your mind. And it's on Viaplay, which I haven't really talked about before, but it's a terrific European series. So this is definitely The Fortress, definitely one you want to catch.
Okay, fantastic. Tell me about The Change.
Oh, God, it's hilarious. So there's this British comedian who I've never heard of before, Bridget Christie. Now, she produced, stars, and writes The Change season 1. So it's about a woman who hits menopause. She's a bit of a no, she works really hard. She keeps a diary of all the invisible chores that she does around the house and how long they take for some reason. And then she realizes she did it because she wants to know how subservient she is to life because she's busy dusting lampshades for her husband, who demands that she just be very housewifely. He throws her a 50th birthday and he makes really sort of uncommitted remarks about her, and that gets her going. She gets kind of furious. She's fed up with it. She hops on her old Triumph that she hasn't been on 30 years, takes off, goes to a place called the Forest of Dean, which is an ancient forest in England, where she grew up. And she's going to climb a tree and find a box that she left there. Well, she has to stay at an eel farm run by two kind of wicked sisters. And the town around there is just chock full of interesting characters. So she comes to life again. It's weird. She's relishing all these unusual people who live in this tiny village as opposed to the, wide open suburbs that she lives in. And there's even a strange sort of subplot. There's an old man who's a sex pest. So she makes friends with him, and it's like forgiveness, and that's what he knows, and they become pals. And she kind of eventually stops him from doing that. However, he does like to parade around town sometimes naked. So, that's the kind of thing. Yes, it is hilarious, this series. And it's very true to life and true to this woman's journey. She went to her doctor. This is another thing that set her off. She went to her doctor and listed 10 things that are wrong with her: heart rate, forgetfulness, blah, 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 blah. She forgot the name Shu. And he says, it's menopause. And she said, really? Is that what you're telling me? So she's disgusted and storms off. And that's another thing that encourages her to hop on that Triumph and get the heck out of there.
I think women are going to love this.
Oh, yeah. And this Bridget Christie's amazing. Amazing.
All right. That one sounds amazing, Anne. I want to move on, though, to Influenced, because this one really interested me because it's a TV show about social media. And one of the people on it, Taryn Delaney Smith, I love her on TikTok. So to see this be on a TV show now is sort of a life imitating art, imitating life, I guess. I don't really know. It's a bizarre concept, but very interesting.
Is it dystopian?
No, but weird.
This show, there's 4 hosts and a very diverse bunch. The lady you mentioned, and there's a trans guy. It's just really modern. And it's fun and bright and jolly. But they talk about their first jobs and they literally take 5 seconds to talk about them. So it's like tweets. It's like a whole bunch of tweets through a half hour. And they give you little life tips, again, like tweets. It's so superficial. It's so jolly, so fun that I don't hate it.
I don't know why that surprised me, Anne, but that's funny.
Prime Video.
The only thing that concerned me about watching that, and I'm curious now that you've watched it, is does it really promote sort of rampant consumerism like TikTok does? Because I noticed them using a lot of different products in the trailers.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I guess, how they're going to make their money. But they also give tips on how to not spend money. So there's a lot there. Well, there has to be. Everything is so short. There's got to be about 900 topics they cover in half an hour. But it is fun, though. I think you'll like it. And I think it's a sign of things to come in TV and streaming.
Absolutely. Made for the social media generation. And as always, thanks so much for joining me. And we'll see you again next week.
See you next week.
Hi, I'm Michelle Davis, host of Maverick Makers. Every week, I'm meeting entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs who are making it happen. These bold thinkers are taking big risks, are trailblazing the way in their industries and lives, and are changing how things are done or made. You will learn about their journeys, their lessons learned, and their biggest Maverick moves to date. Listen to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or at maverickmakerspodcast.com.
Marketing and branding are essential aspects of any creative entrepreneur's journey. Today, I'm excited to welcome Vanessa Chiasson, an experienced writer and strategist with over a decade of freelancing under her belt. Vanessa works with value seekers, producing beautifully crafted stories and offering coaching and consulting services for writers, bloggers, and content creators. She joins me to discuss how freelancers and creative entrepreneurs can effectively market and brand themselves. Welcome to What She Said, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
I think this is a huge topic because entrepreneurs are growing every day. More and more people are self-employed. And this is a huge aspect of that is marketing and branding yourself. And often freelancers feel like they need to be all things to all people. How can they overcome this and find a clear sense of identity in their marketing efforts?
I think this is one of the most challenging things about being either a freelance writer or freelance in any creative field is that you do think there is such a difficult economy. I have to be all things to all people because who am I to turn down work? Like, how audacious would I be to say, oh, no, I prefer to work in this particular niche or this particular lane. But the way I look at it is that you don't have to give up being a generalist. You don't have to give up being someone who covers a wide variety of topics, a wide variety of passions, but you do have to know your style and your tone that works best with things. And when it becomes difficult for me to think, do I want to take on this project or do I not? I'm really looking at, can I give it such a beautiful outcome that the client's going to want to come back to me again and again and again? Or am I better off saying, I'm not the perfect person for this. I can refer you to a friend who I think will really make this shine. And I know then that I'm going to get that business back, both in terms of having collaborations with a friend who's grateful for my referrals, but also possibly from the client who appreciates the fact that I said, there's a better fit out there for you, but like, let's keep in touch because you never know when there might be a really good collab for the two of us happening down the road.
That's excellent advice. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I have done it myself, declined projects, basically because I can't do my best at it. So that's great advice. You talk about 4 pillars of work you believe are essential for any self-employed person. And how does that fit in with marketing and branding in that sort of framework for those 4 pillars?
Absolutely. So often if you're a writer or a photographer, a videographer, we talk about that as if it's all we do. And I wish it was. I wish I had nothing to do all day but to write. That would be my idea of heaven. But in truth, that's just one of the many, many things that as a self-employed person, I have to take care of. That's one of my pillars, my actual craft. I also have to take care of all of my admin and organization. So hello to everyone out there who also hates sorting through receipts. Like, solidarity, I feel you. But we're the only people who can do that. Even if we have a virtual assistant, that's part of organization responsibilities. We're also responsible for research and development. What are the current trends? What conference should I go to next? How is AI going to affect my job? That's a big part of what we do. And I think of the fourth pillar as the marketing. We have to let the world know who we are, what we do, and how we can serve them, how we can help them. And I think in an ideal world, as a self-employed individual, those four pillars kind of balance each other out and help each other out. If I'm on top of my admin and organization game, it's going to make it a lot easier when I'm going over to do marketing work, for instance. Or if I'm really marketing myself well, that's really going to support my craft of writing, because it's going to connect me with more projects that are ideal. But the challenge, of course, is that things are never really perfectly in balance. Sometimes things are skewed like way one way and others get ignored. And I feel that sometimes marketing is sort of the lowly pillar on the rung that is ignored the most often, because you think it's not urgent. It's something you can do at any time, which means, of course, we do it at no time in many cases.
How can freelancers and small business owners use the story brand approach to make their clients the heroes of their own stories?
I love this question because so often, if you've seen television ads for things like, say, lawyers, and no offense to the beautiful lawyers out there who are listening, but very often a television ad will say, like, we have a combined years, 50 years of combined experience. We have won all these impressive awards. And the ideas that they're trying to say to you is like, we are so good at what we do. You want to hire us. And that's not a bad thing. But a much more effective thing, I think, is when you see the ads to say things like, we will fight for you. We know you have been battling your, automobile insurance claim so hard on your own. You've been working so hard and you just need someone to help you with these final steps. And I think this approach resonates with people a lot more. The idea that they're the hero of their own story. They are on a quest to make something happen. And it sounds a bit cheesy. It's like you're in a video game quest or something, but you have something, your customer, your client, your audience, they have something that they're working on. And you aren't there to be the hero. You're there to help the hero. You're there to help them along the way. Two classic examples from the marketing world might be Home Depot's ad of like, you can do it, we can help. Or Nike, when they say things like, just do it. They're not saying things like, we produce the best shoes in the world. They don't even mention the shoes. They're saying that you can do it. And I think for a writer or someone else who's in the creative self-employment field, you're not really going at it by saying, I'm the best writer in the world. Look at all these fancy awards I have, like fancy, fancy, fancy. It's more like you, the client, the customer, are creating a really amazing message. You are doing something really incredible for your audience, and I can help you take that to the next level. So one thing that I say when I'm talking with editors is I can deliver reassurance and results. I'm saying that I know you have to meet the demands of an ever-increasing landscape in publishing. I know that you need content that really holds your audience's attention because everyone is competing for that little, piece of the pie, so to speak, in terms of eyes on their content online. And I'm saying I can deliver that to you because I'm offering you things that are going to be delivered on time. I'm offering you diverse sources, and I'm offering, a wealth of experience in storytelling that can help really captivate your audience. But I'm not the hero here. You are. I'm just making sure that you have what you need on your journey.
The next question, I think, is what I think will trip people up. At least it trips me up. And that's developing a strong personal brand. And is it because we're too close to ourselves? It's hard to detach and see what that should be. How does a person develop a strong personal brand that resonates with their audience?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And it's funny when you ask this, I think of all people, my Uncle Bob, who will unfortunately never listen to this podcast, which is probably a good thing. So I grew up with this mindset that marketing and personal branding or having something you were known for was almost like a dirty word because of the actions of my Uncle Bob, who was in investing and was infamous for handing out his business card at funerals. So anytime I talk about marketing or branding, I always hear my mother saying, don't be like your Uncle Bob. Like, don't be tacky. Don't be ostentatious. And so I guess that's step number one. Don't solicit at funerals. But number two might be to realize your personal brand is what you do best. It is not necessarily, I always wear pink when I'm at events. It's not about, I have the craftiest of taglines. Your personal brand is the thing that makes you, you. I broke into Reader's Digest as a publication because they found me online when I was talking about one of my big passions in life, which is Anne of Green Gables, the classic childhood book from Canadian author Lucy Maud Montgomery. And they reached out to me. They're like, oh, could you do an article about this aspect of this Anne of Green Gables? I'm like, can I? I'm like, I could do that all day long. And it's because I was talking about the things that I was so passionate about online. And I think the things that in the past we thought were silly or maybe a little bit geeky about us or a little bit embarrassing, those are all parts of our personal brand. So never be afraid to be your absolute self, provided you're not like my Uncle Bob. The other piece of advice I would have would be to talk with some friends who understand your industry, but aren't in your industry. And I had this conversation about 2 years ago with my good friend Allie over coffee. And I was saying, like, I am struggling to figure out what it is that my brand is, because when you freelance for so many outlets, your voice is the voice of whatever they want it to be. I can be Toronto Star's voice one week, and the next week I'm BuzzFeed's voice. And that's one of my selling points. I'm so malleable and flexible, but who am I and what is my voice? And it took a long time to see, what do all of these kinds of diverse pieces have in common? For me, I realized it's bringing warmth and depth to the pieces I do. Warmth in terms of being able to really express why I care deeply about a project, why it matters to me, and depth because I am willing to do extra research. I love connecting with diverse sources. I'm willing to share my sources happily with my editors so they see, yes, Vanessa does indeed do her thing. But it took so long to come up with those two words for me, warmth and depth. It really, really helped to have someone else who knew me, knew what I did, but wasn't too close to help me brainstorm it out and talk it out.
That's excellent advice. I mean, personally, even when I have to write my bio, I always go to other people and say, how do you see me? Because sometimes we don't see it ourselves. So I think that's great advice. You run workshops for creatives. You're constantly helping and sharing your knowledge. I want people to be able to find you because you are incredible for helping people define their brand. So how can they do that?
I would love for people to come check out my main website. It's vanessachiasson.com. And at the top, you'll see information about my Ink and Income program. This is a community-minded, affordable program for writers that includes accountability, focused co-working sessions every month, group coaching, and quarterly planning days. So for someone who's struggling with getting their brand, getting their name out there, struggling with how to do, look at different ways to market themselves, it would be a wonderful place to collaborate with them.
All right, fantastic. And are you on Instagram? Any social channels we can share?
I am on Instagram. Oh my gosh, I would love to connect with all your beautiful audience on Instagram. I'm there at VLC Writes. So that's VLCWRITES. So please find me there, everyone.
All right, fantastic. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
If you're a fan of The Bear, then you're going to love my next guest. I'm excited to introduce you to Samantha Shier, a talented writer and script coordinator who has been making waves in the television industry. Samantha was a staff writer for the upcoming FX half-hour series English Teacher, premiering September 2nd, and recently wrapped up her role as a writer's assistant and script coordinator on season 3 of The Bear, one of the most popular shows on TV right now. Welcome to What She Said, Samantha.
Thank you so much. What a delicious intro. Thank you.
Well, this is such a unique role that you work in. I love it. So can you start by telling us a bit about your background and how you got into the television industry?
Totally. So right now I currently live in Toronto. And I kind of noticed that there wasn't a lot of writers' rooms for comedies here. Like there's always like two or three, but you really have to be in the know and there's just not as many opportunities. So I kind of had trouble getting my footing and I really wanted to work in the comedy space forever. Um, and I don't do stand up. Like I tried to do performing, but I just wanted to write. That was kind of what I wanted to do. So I ended up doing a lot of production and just kind of started as an office PA, which is kind of just a production assistant in the office. And I worked on a lot of shows that had shot here. Some of them were American, some of them were Canadian, but like nothing really gripped me. I didn't feel connected to the creative space, and I wasn't because you're just kind of behind the scenes doing paperwork or grocery shopping for an office. It's kind of like the beginning. But the show called What We Do in the Shadows had asked for my availability to work as an office PA. And because there were some big American names behind it, like Jermaine Clements, who he was like the star of Flight of the Conchords, and then Paul Sims, who has like, he's like one of the TV gods considered, worked on Letterman. He made his own show called News Radio when he was 28 and just, he worked on Girls. He's worked on like everything that I love. So that's why I took the job as a PA. And you kind of hear stories as a person from Toronto of like the way to work on American shows is hopefully the showrunner will kind of like pluck you. Like you have this idea that like you'll be wanted by someone at some point. And it's very far-fetched and it feels very rare. But thankfully, this guy, Paul Sims, who has become my mentor, he didn't like his assistant from New York and asked for me to kind of tag along and assist him, which is very rare and kind of unbelievable. But from that point on, I was working with him full time. So I was his assistant. I was in the writer's room in New York. I became the writer's assistant from that point on, and then a producer from then. And that's just kind of how I made my way up, was thankfully because of this guy.
And is this how your role on The English Teacher came about then?
Yeah. So my main goal again was to be a writer, and it just feels very far-fetched. So when I was assisting Paul, he at this point was he's consistently developing shows. And one of the shows that he was really working on was with this comedian named Brian Jordan Alvarez, who's really funny. And I had thankfully followed his work, working with Paul and before that. But he developed this show with Brian. And when it came to the point where I like transitioned out from being his assistant, I gave Paul and Brian my pilot, and I asked if I could be considered for the room. And then they both read what I had written and they wanted me to be a writer on the show, which was just like, it was a lot of moving parts that came together. And then I was able to be in the room for that, which was amazing. So that it was from working with Paul that I was able to maneuver being on a different show.
You've also worked as a writer's assistant and script coordinator on The Bear, which is an incredibly popular show right now. So can you describe what it's like to work with multiple writers on a show and what your day-to-day looks like in that role?
Totally. I think because I had worked on different FX shows, that's how they got my name. And Io, the lead of the show, is someone that I became friendly with because she also wrote on What We Do in the Shadows. So it's just kind of like this FX family. So she had recommended me to be the writer's assistant and script coordinator for The Bear, which, at that point I already had a staff credit. So I didn't really want to go backwards, but I would do it for The Bear. I was very vocal about that. So my day to day, we met thankfully on Zoom, which I say thankfully because like otherwise I don't know if I would have gotten the job because I'm in Toronto and you need a visa to work in the States. But so it was me, it was 4 writers, Renee Goubet, Karen Joseph Adcock, Catherine Shatina, Alex Russell, who are all like very brilliant, and I was very intimidated to be around them. And then the showrunners, Joanna Callow, is the one who hired me. And then Chris Storer would be in the room sometimes. And it's kind of like how it works is I would just write everything that the writers would say and like kind of track storylines. We had like this computer-based storyboard where like people would write storylines on different Post-its. It's online, so we could all see it. And I just would track what each episode would be about and track like, Richie's storyline throughout the season and each character's storyline to make sure that everything made sense. And I would organize the notes after every day in the room and send them out. And when people were assigned scripts, I would compile like all the notes from all the days that were relevant to that episode and give them like a packet of notes that pertain to that episode storylines. And then I was able to pitch and, just speak because of how small the room is. Like my voice mattered, which is really nice. Even though I wasn't like a writer, I was allowed to, speak freely and say any ideas I thought of, which rocked. And then once it got to production, that's when I became the script coordinator. So whenever like Chris or Joanna had any adjustments to the scripts, I would implement them and then distribute them wide to the entire cast and crew and just be completely available for any sort of script changes.
What do you think has contributed to the success of The Bear? Like, why is it such a hit show?
Oh my God. I feel like people hadn't seen something like that in the food space before. And like, I do feel like there's this intensity to it. I think the comedy really comes from these actors that are so incredibly talented and so funny. Like, Abby Elliott had been on SNL. Eben had been on Girls. Like, these are just like true. And Io is a stand-up comedian and like comedy writer first and foremost. So I think the talent there is so amazing. And like you want these people to do well, even if they're so flawed. And I think there's just like a grit to this show that people haven't really seen and like kind of a peek behind what the restaurant scene's about and what Chicago's all about. And I feel like people really like to see that. And I feel like people will always comment, like my mom is like, it gives me so much anxiety, but that's kind of the point. Like people want to see like these kind of intense stories and, just how chaotic the restaurant world can be.
Do you have any advice for aspiring writers who are looking to break into the television industry?
I will say I went to Humber, which is like a college in Toronto for TV writing. And Nathan Fielder famously went there and he's really funny. But I feel like they would always have people that had come in and, directors of like Schitt's Creek or just people in the television world in Toronto. And it felt like they'll always talk about their stories and how they got their success. And it always felt so distant and like serendipitous and like, nothing is straightforward in this job, as you know. So none of it felt very attainable. So I wouldn't give any advice about how I did it, but I would say find the shows and the people that you look up to that you think are really smart and that you want these people to like you. Because I had worked on a lot of shows where I wasn't motivated to succeed because it was like a sci-fi show or like something that I wasn't really attached to and didn't like my heart wasn't there. But the second I met these people that had these like insane, discographies and IMDb profiles, I was so motivated to succeed with them, around them. And just try and meet and talk and get all the information you can out of the people that you admire.
Well, you are one of those people that people will admire now.
Ooh.
So where can they find you?
Okay.
And keep up with you and perhaps reach out for some advice?
I am I had a website. I'm working on it. I'm working on finishing it. But I mean, ultimately, you can find me on my Instagram at sam.shire. You could find me on my Twitter. That's also at sam.shire. Everything I post is stupid, but that's how you can follow along with me and connect with me. And I'm available.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. You'll notice I did not ask for any spoilers on the bear. I behaved myself. So people have to watch the show to find out what happens in season 3. So, perfect. And of course, English Teacher. When does that start airing?
So English Teacher, that airs on FX, Hulu, which is like tough for Canadians, but I'll figure it out. September 2nd. And it will be, I'm pretty sure, all the episodes soon after. And then What We Do in the Shadows, which I worked a little bit on season 6. This is the finale. This is the final season, will be October 21st.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Samantha.
Thank you, Candace. Nice talking to you.
If today's podcast resonated with you, spread the word and share the inspiration. Don't forget to hit subscribe on What She Said across your favorite podcast platforms. Crave more? Join my vibrant community by signing up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com, and let's get social on Facebook, Instagram, and X at What She Said Talk. Dive into my world a little deeper on TikTok and Threads at Candace Said. And for those who love the airwaves, catch me weekly on 105.9 The Region, Blast the Radio, and 107.7 Pulse FM. Until next time, keep making waves and remember, your voice matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Yerko.
And I'm Tara Sands. Now available from Maji Media is our new podcast, 4 Kids Flashback. 4 Kids is the company who brought you the English dub of Pokémon in the late 90s and so many other shows like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Shaman King, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kirby, the infamous One Piece dub, and so many more.
We'll be talking to the people who worked at 4 Kids. Actors, directors, writers, editors, producers, engineers, you get the point. And hopefully get the answers to questions both you and I have about the company.
I actually worked there as a voice actor on some of the shows.
And I was a kid watching the shows and remember way more than Tara does.
And thank God for that. Steve is actually a professional storyboard artist, which gives some really unique insights into anime and animation. Subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts. That's the number 4 Kids Flashback.
Hi, it's Jeff Woods, host of The Blue Hotel, a show about relationships and pleasure, and about the most important thing you can do, be yourself. And there's this new related project that's about exactly that. And this is an invitation to you to get your hands on it. My new book about relationships, sexuality, pleasure, and education around all kinds of subjects within over 40 chapters. It's called Being Bi. You don't have to be bi to enjoy it. There's a Kickstarter on now that rewards backers who pledge to fund in any of the 4 tiers, which includes the ticket to the Toronto launch party this fall. So take a look, kindly share with a friend or 3. Simply check out the Jeff Woods Being Bi Kickstarter. Just open a web browser, do a quick search on the Jeff Woods Being Bi Kickstarter. It's only on until the morning of Friday, August the 10th.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.